In the continuation of our chatbot, we're going to now provide a little more direction to it so that it can respond to what the player does. So I've used diagrams.net, formerly draw.io, that we can flowchart out what we're doing. So we start out with our first question, and each of these diamonds represent what we're going to refer to as our question track. So the question track is what type of questions we're asking and then tracking out what the responses are going to be. And currently we only, in all of the examples I have, there's only two options. So good, bad, and then every time you do an unknown response, it dumps it into our generic response. And well, we know what happens when we move into our generic responses is we start calculating our generic responses, and it's a end cycle. We can't get through it, and that's okay. Now you could make it go. It could provide a response, ask a question that would bring us back into one of our other tracks, so it possibly could repeat what we're doing, and that's certainly an option as well. So from our opening question, we're going to analyze the mood. And when we say, how are you today, we're assuming that in most cases people answer, yeah, good. They might say bad. They could say okay. So you can kind of play with it how you want. Again, you get to write out your opinionated chatbot and figure out what its magic is going to be. So if they answer good, and we find good in the answer that they have provided, then what we're going to do is ask, what is your favorite color? So after we do that, we're going to move from our mood analysis into our color analysis. And in this case, I am looking for two colors, red and blue. So if we choose blue, then we say, I thought you were feeling good. Do you need help? Because they're blue, they're sad. So I'm playing off of that. If we say red, we say, do you want a date? And then we move into a love analysis, and we can, again, track this. So you can run this indefinitely. And this is really, on its most basic terms, is kind of what is happening with ChatGPT, where it's just doing calculated BS. Because what these large language model chatbots are doing is they're making best guesses based on analyzing tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of data. And once they analyze that data, they can make predictions so that if you're asking for something, it can compare what you've asked to things that are similar to that and then make an educated guess. So it's guessing. It's BSing its way. It doesn't really know an answer. It can't evaluate the quality of the answer it's providing. It just guesses. So it's great at BSing us in what it does. Here we're creating something that is far more simple because we're only able to look for a couple of different options based on what we predict. So if when we provide a response and then ask that follow-up question, what is really happening is we're going to be asking questions that have very limited answer options. So if you ask yes or no questions, or if you ask questions like color and just choose really basic options with that, if they provide that answer, they might get something that is interesting. So I encourage you to draw on a piece of paper or hop on to diagrams.net, which is free, and there's the download version you can use, and you can flowchart out your particular project. It is a pretty cool program for building flowcharts, so I would encourage you to take a look at it. But now let's go and see what we can do to start coding this. And this error does appear when we sit long enough, because we have the preview going on. It's not an actual error in our project. It's just that because we have the live preview going on, it causes some problems with that. So that's not a big deal to worry about, because if I refresh the page, we can see it goes away. And the warning messages that we saw in previous tutorials are because certain extensions in Chrome they were flagging for source map problems. So by disabling those extensions, then we've made those error messages go away. So then we're in good shape. So now what we need to do is we need to really start fleshing out playing our game here, because we don't want to just do the generic response calculation. So one thing I'm going to do is I need to add in an additional variable. So I'm going to go back into my section where I have my variables, and I'm going to create a variable, and I'll use let. Now we use let instead of const here because when I say const, that's a variable that I can't change the kind of thing that it is or its value. Where by using let, this creates a variable that we can then update its actual value, because const, we're just referencing this object. In this case, the paragraph or the input or the button. These are all objects. It's not changing, so we can use const for that. But anytime we have a value, like in this case, we change the text or the string that's there, we need to then be able to update that. So we have to use let as part of it. So I'm going to just make a variable here, and I will call it question track. And the first question track we're going to use, if you remember off of the diagram, we'll be doing our mood analysis. So I'm going to set it equal to mood. Now going into play game, I'm going to write out an if statement here, and then as we flesh out this if statement, then we will finally wrap it up with populating the computer's message and updating the human value. So the if statement we want to write here. So we're going to create a question track, and this one will be for a mood. So we use double equal signs when we're comparing. So we say when question track, we're asking is it equal to mood. So when it is, then we can put in our curly braces, and then here so then we call our mood analysis function. Haven't written that function yet, so that will cause a problem until we fix that. Now we could use a switch statement if we wanted through here, but I'm just going to flesh out a couple of these because again, this is a teaching prototype. This is not trying to create the actual finished project. So we have our mood analysis, our color analysis. Question track is now equal to, in this case we'll do dog. Oh, missed my key there. And then we'll have our dog analysis. And then finally, we'll end with else. And inside that else is where we're going to put our generic response. So if we're not on one of these tracks, or if our question track is something that we haven't accounted for yet, we don't have a function for it yet, then we're just going to default to our generic response calculation. So that's the core structure of what we need. And now what we need to pull this off is to start building out these functions. So we have function mood analysis, and all of these kind of question track analysis functions are going to be very, very similar. And so much so that we could rewrite this program and use more complicated array structures, or even store the values inside of arrays, and we could do work on doing that. But right now we're doing a starting prototype, and while you can optimize things, while you can create code that is really compact and efficient and well written, it's often a better approach to be a little bit more verbose and even repetitive in your code when you begin to develop your proof of concept. And through iterations, you refine and improve the code as you work on it to make it better. So one thing that we do need to think about, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using a method. So if the human message, so what they typed into the box, so if we say the index of that, and I'm going to first look for, if we remember in our flowchart, the options I'm looking for are good and bad. So if they say good, and what we do is we choose not equal to -1. So if it's not equal to -1, then we want to do something and then update that question track. So a couple things about that. So we ask, what is your mood? If they say good, then we're going to switch. We're going to say, hey, what's your favorite color? And we're going to, so that's the message we're going to ask next. And we switch our question track over to color. If they say bad, then we're going to say you sound depressed, you like dogs, and we'll switch our question track to dog. So as we do this, I'm just going to put, so our computer message is going to be equal to, I'm just going to write, I want to get the core structure, and then I'm going to flesh out the whole sentence with that. Question track is going to be equal to color. And then we say else if human message dot index of bad is not equal to -1. And we'll kind of explain what that means here in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And then our question track is now equal to dog. So over in W3 Schools, we have JavaScript array method indexOf. So this is under in our array iteration. So we use in iteration where it's how we process or go through an array to look for things. So the item we're looking for is indexOf because it gives us a value with it, and what we do is we ask for that particular item, and if it returns that item to us, it tells us where it is in that array. So now, like in the example here, we can see where we're asking for apple. Now if I get rid of, but the array, it's the first item in the array, but its index number, which is often what we care about. If I get rid of the +1 there and run that, we'll see its index position. We're going to change that to index position, because this is what indexOf is doing, is it's telling us where is it in that. So it's found in index position 0. But now, if I put this letter here, lowercase a, index position -1. So -1 is returned when it doesn't find it. So if I said mango, we would assume 0, 1, 2, 3 should be the value that we get 3. But if I put in a lowercase m, -1. If I do a capital MA, again, -1. Because it's case sensitive. Capital MA is not the same as capital M lowercase a. Those are, as far as JavaScript is concerned, those are separate things. They are not the same. so that doesn't work on it. So if we go back into our code, what we're saying is if the index of good is not equal to -1. So what that means is it found it. We don't care where it found it. We just care that it found it. So as long as it returns -1, it found it. But if it didn't, if it finds it, if it doesn't find it, it gives a value of -1. So if I said okay as my result, well, it's not going to find good because that was -1. So now let's try, does it find bad? Nope, because okay is not bad because didn't find bad in there. So what we need to then finish this if statement, then we'll say else generic response calculation. So what it's going to do is, as it goes through here, it looks for good. If it finds it, great. If it finds dog or bad, great. Otherwise, it moves into our generic responses. So that's the core of the logic that we're working with here. So index of the item we're looking for, it gives us a value unless it can find it. And if it can't find it, it returns -1. So if it returns something that's not -1, it found it somewhere and it will have a number that's not -1. So that is our base magic that we have here. Now I need to just create the next two, just so that we can test our program. And because if I try and run it without at least defining those functions, then it's going to give me an error message. So now that we've talked a little bit about what this means, I'm going to update my text here. So if they say good, then I'll say glad to hear it. What is your favorite color? And now if they're bad, so we were thinking they're depressed, it's like you sound depressed. Then we'll say, do you like dogs? Because dogs are a nice companion animal that can help people through troubling times. Okay. So let's save this. Jump back into our project over here. And now, in my project, how are you today? And I'll say good. And not quite working. You should get a life. Are you in therapy? Now, when we do this, we're asking about the human message, but we've never given it any value except being a string here. So we do need to set, once we call play game, what we need to have happen is we need to set our human message equal to the value of human, which is what was typed in. So with that, I will say human message is equal to human dot value. And one thing we want to do here is, as we talked about the different case values, uppercase, lowercase, and saw how that caused issues, we have a method for modifying strings where we can say to lowercase. So no matter what I type in, it's going to treat it all as lowercase. Now if we save that and go here, I'll just say good, return, we can see glad to hear it, what's your favorite color? So we can see how it's now using, it found good and did that. Now we can also, if we refresh the page here and say I am good, notice it said glad to hear it. But remember, I typed in I am good. Well, I apostrophe am good. So when we're looking for things, if I say mango is my fave fruit, run this. Okay, so it can't find all of that. So if it's looking for mango, but if it's looking for mango out of, does mango exist in this whole string? Which is what we're doing in ours, because what we're trying to find out is, does a word exist in this string? So when we're using indexOf, we can use indexOf to find items in our array, but we can also use it just to analyze the string to go, hey, is that word part of this string? Because that's really what we're doing here, is we're using the indexOf method of strings versus indexOf method on arrays. So we're asking, does good appear inside whatever was typed? So if I say I am good, or if I said pretty good, all of those would return true in this case. But if I said I am God, God is not the same as good, it wouldn't be able to find it. So as long as the word we look for here is part of the string that is provided by the human, it will return a true value. So now that I have my mood analysis done, we're just going to wrap up this example tutorial here, and we'll do our next 2 items. And you can certainly flesh out your project in more detail. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to copy paste into this and now kind of revise what I want them to be. So now when we're analyzing for color, my examples were red and blue. And if we go back over into draw.io and take a look at that, we see, so if I choose red, it's going to be, our question track will be love. And if they choose blue, our question track is going to be sad. And so let's go put that in. So if they love here, it's going to be our sad one. So now if they say red, we can say, you sound romantic. So again, you know, our chatbot's a little bit creepy here. And, you know, again, that would return yes or no values with it. So I haven't defined love analysis on here because I'm only fleshing out kind of 3 different analysis on my project, but you can certainly flesh out more on yours. So now when I look at blue, it's like, are you depressed? Blue is sad. Oh. Actually, I should rephrase that and say, blue is sad, are you depressed? So that would make more sense. Because again, provide a statement and then say, are you depressed? So we provide a response, and then we ask a question. And ideally, yes or no questions, you can then flesh this out with lots of different analysis as long as your questions are yes or no. Like color analysis, it could fail very quickly if they don't choose red or blue. But in our mood analysis, if they don't say good or bad, it's going to fail. But if we start moving into yes or no, then it's going to be better. So in this case, where we asked the question, do you like dogs? And if they say yes, or if they say no. So if they say yes, then we're going to say, so do I. Do you have a dog? And in this case, you know, now we're going to move into our dog owner question track. And if they say no, let's say, interesting. Do you like cats? And then we'll move into our question track of cat. So we have these different tracks, and if you ask these questions, do you have a dog? Yes or no. Do you like cats? Yes or no. Now, if they answer maybe, well, you could have one more possible track and flow chart out. So you have 3 options plus generic on each one if you wanted, yes, no, maybe. Or you just hope that people will be more straightforward and just do yes and no. You can build more generic responses in with it. So we have a couple, but you could have lots of generic responses. So then they really start to get, kind of weirded out with what you're doing. But now if I save this and go here and I'll say bad, and then I'll say yes, and then says, so do you have a dog? And I'll say yes. And now we're in our question track at this point. We're now in the generic ones, because if we go into our console and look, and I type in question track, we can see that it's coming up our question track. So one thing you can do in the console, you can type in a variable name and it shows you what the current value is. So I don't even have to log it. I can just type it over here and we can see it's dog owner. So, but we now know that we're trapped in this generic responses, so we're never going to be able to get out of it. And that's okay for the purposes of this assignment, because what we're trying to do is to learn a little bit about working with arrays. So we're accessing arrays. We are removing elements from arrays. We're calculating the length of them. We're doing a little bit of generating random numbers here, so we can play with that. We have some conditional logic going on, so we have if, else statements happening. We are modifying strings. We are analyzing strings, looking for particular values. So on this relatively simple project, we've been able to introduce a number of really important concepts in JavaScript programming. So I hope that you make an interesting chatbot that's fun, opinionated, and quirky, and share it with the world. Have fun and good luck.